Here in your neighborhood in Cameroon, children have not gone to school for the last many years. Conflict. In northern Mali, the country is divided de facto into two. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, 120 armed groups, yet it is the busiest airspace in the continent of Africa. Minerals are being taken away to Europe and America. We must change our governance. Because if we don't deal with the question of governance, we are going nowhere. Africa has become a continent where after every election there is conflict. Because the pursuit of power is a cutthroat competition where throats are actually cut. And when the SMO was here and he consulted the oracles, he discovered that we have a problem in that direction. And that the sooner we resolve that, the safer we will be. Africa can rise and Africa will rise. But it's not going to rise by prayer and fasting. We must pray and fast, but it will not happen. Because the last time I checked, even those of you who are believers, when Abraham... You know, in the year 2013, African heads of states and government sat in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. That was during the chairmanship of South Africa's Nkosazana and Dlamini Zuma. And they decided that we can no longer continue to live in this muck and mire. Africa must know progress. And they came up with Africa Agenda 2063. My sister spoke to it so very ably and eloquently and passionately. What we don't say is that during that week, Nkosazana and Dlamini Zuma wrote an apology letter to Kwame Nkrumah, telling Kwame, we apologize. What we are doing now, you saw in 1963. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Now we are living through Africa Agenda 2063. We are living through the Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm not a Jewish prophet nor related to one. But I can confirm to you, we will not fulfill any one of them. You cannot, in the nature of things, engage the reverse gear and then think you'll reach your destination. You cannot. And that is what most African countries have done. So the time is now, as the cliche goes, when you are in a hole, you stop digging. And Africa must stop digging. And if we stop digging and we look at what we have, Africa Continental Free Trade Area says that we are going to trade amongst ourselves in the world. Africa trades ourselves at best at 20%. Europe at about 70%, North America possibly 65%, Asia now going to 60%, Latin America going to 55%, Africa 20%. What must we do? We must stop certain things that stand in our way. Conflict. Look at Africa as I speak to you. Look at Sudan. For the last 2 months, there is no economic activity in Sudan. They are destroying what they once built. Even if you wanted to trade, who do you trade with? Generating as at now 2.5 million refugees. I do not hear the voices of African leaders, no. Their silence is eloquent. And when they speak mutedly in sanitized languages, and people are dying. Children who ought to be vaccinated in Sudan are not getting vaccinated. Here in your neighborhood in Cameroon, children have not gone to school for the last many years. Conflict. In northern Mali, the country is divided de facto into two. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, 120 armed groups, yet it is the busiest airspace in the continent of Africa. Minerals are being taken away to Europe and America. Central African Republic, the same. Libya, the same. Several months ago, I wrote to the chair of the African Union and to all African heads of state and said, convene a meeting with only one agenda item. What can we do to save Africa from this slide? Only 4 replied. That is the state of the continent of Africa. We must deal with the basic things. We must solve conflict. We must change our governance. Because if we don't deal with the question of governance, we are going nowhere. Africa has become a continent where after every election there is conflict. Because the pursuit of power is a cutthroat competition where throats are actually cut. And when the SMO was here and he consulted the oracles, he discovered that we have a problem in that direction. And that the sooner we resolve that, the safer we will be. Africa can rise and Africa will rise. But it's not going to rise by prayer and fasting. We must pray and fast, but it will not happen. Because the last time I checked, even those of you are believers, when Abraham was taken from Ur of the Chaldeans and given Canaan, it was not on a silver platter. He had to fight the Canaanites. He had to fight the Philistines. That is the nature of divine instruction. Go ye and subdue the world by the sweat of thy brow. The kitchen where they make manna was closed. Manna will no longer come. Because you must now make your manna. And it is our duty, therefore, as Africans to begin to rethink the younger generation. You know, there is a saying in Chichewa in Malawi that more precious than our children are our children's children. So when we are doing these things, we must remind ourselves that we are doing for this generation and generations yet to be born. When my good sister was speaking, she started in 1969 about the education. We were alive. Then you came to the year 2023 and we are alive. But when you came to the year 2077, knowing as we do that we are not immortal, we shall be assumed into heaven. Some of you who will be alive, you'll be old and possibly stupid and not very useful to anybody. This is why we say it is intergenerational. So, brethren, what we must now do is to ask ourselves, then what do we do? Beyond the rhetoric, what do we do? And what is beautiful in Africa now, not only in the continent of Africa, is that there is a consciousness. You know, I'm in a church setting, and sometimes it is good to remind you, for those of you who believe and believe rightly, even in the Bible, sometimes those who are saying the right things think that they are the only ones, thinking in silo. You remember Elijah going and saying, but Lord, I'm the only one who has not bowed to Baal. He was told, no, there are 7,000 others. And as I travel across Africa, there are 7,000 others. Today I've seen many of them. Today I've had the honor and privilege of listening to many of them. One enlightened more than the other. One more passionate than the other, talking about what we can do. And talking about the place of Nigeria in that space. Times without number have talked about Nigeria and reminded Nigerians that the day you become great, that is the day Africa becomes great. When I hear in Nigeria economists and politicians telling me that the GDP of Nigeria is 500 billion United States dollars, and that therefore it is the biggest economy in the world, I am reminded of the words of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, my friend, when he says, in a debate between dwarfs, what is the value of one dwarf saying, I'm taller than the other dwarfs? You are still a dwarf. This Nigeria is capable in 5 years of becoming a 3 trillion GDP economy. The fundamentals are there. Talk of human resource. And I think it is, my sister, you go to anywhere in the world, tell me, engineering, artificial intelligence, space, Nigerians. The saying goes, if you go to any part of the world and you do not find a Nigerian, run away from there. Because there is nothing to be done there. It is these Nigerians who will move the country. I keep on reminding my Nigerian friends, you say you are 220 million. No, you are not. I suspect you are 300 million. And if my suspicion is correct, you owe this region and this continent the talent. You know, when people talk about instability in Nigeria, I ask them, can you handle refugees from Nigeria? Can you? You cannot. They'll overwhelm the entire West Africa. So it is in Africans' genuine desire that Nigeria remains great and becomes great. All the ingredients are there. Writing in 1983, Chinua Achebe, in his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, said that it is simply and squarely a problem of leadership. That is an African problem, and I also want to say it is also a problem of followership. Before the Ezemwe started speaking, he talked about what is expected of him in the village. When you are appointed into a public office in Africa, they actually expect you to be a thief. And if you don't steal, they say you are not wise. So in the minds of many people in Africa, Abuja and Lagos are hunting grounds where they send their sons and daughters to steal, to take antelopes, which they share in the village. That thinking must change, because service for humanity is what we must look at. And I have no doubt in my mind that Africa can do it. When I look at Africa and I look at Nigeria, I see an Africa that is capable of rising because our sons and daughters now present in the continent and even in the diaspora. You go and see the Africans in the diaspora, whether they are in Antigua and Barbuda, and my good friend here, the ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda, Wallace Williams, Trinidad and Tobago, will agree with me in that regard. You go to St. Vincent's and Grenadines, you go to Jamaica, everybody now wants to come and invest in Africa. But we must make the circumstances right. So we must improve our politics. We must make our laws enabling. We must improve our agriculture. We must improve our health. We must improve our education system. We must improve the quality of the environment so that we stop our young men and women dying in the Mediterranean Sea, dying off the coast of Dhaka, going into modern-day slavery in Saudi Arabia, in that part of the world. It can be done. We have seen it done during our lifetime. We have seen South Korea do it. We have seen China do it. We are seeing India do it. We can see Indonesia doing it. We have seen Vietnam after the war doing it. And within the continent of Africa, there are other examples. We have seen Rwanda rise like a phoenix during our lifetime. We have seen Botswana do it. We have seen Cabo Verde do it. We have seen Mauritius doing it. It can be done. And if we agree that it can be done, what we must now do is to take a solemn vow. And that solemn vow must come from these words spoken by Julius Kambarage Nyerere on the 6th day of March 1997 in Accra, Ghana, when he was called upon to be the guest on the 40th anniversary of Ghana's independence, this is what he said, and I say this, then I shut up and sit down. Mwalimu said, when Kwame Nkrumah told us in 1963 that we ought to unite, we agreed with him. And we did not for one moment believe that unity in and of itself will solve our problems. What we believe that unity will make our voices as Africans to be respected. Because the rest of the world is not bothered about our Ghanaianness or our Tanzanianness. He did not say this, but I'm adding, but our Nigerianness or Ugandanness. The rest of the world only knows about Africa. The time is now. Our generation fought the colonialists and brought what we thought was independence, but they gave us the crown without the jewels. But of all the sins that we have committed, there is a single sin that we must never commit: the sin of giving up, the sin of despair. And each one of us must remember that we have a role to play. We have a role to play because if the ocean is to exist, the droplets must be good. If the forest is to exist, the trees must be good. Play your part and let the results be the testimony of your efforts. God bless you.